In section 13, we're reviewing something we've done already. We're taking a list of numbers and we're squaring each value and printing it to the screen using a for loop. In section 14, we have a dictionary defined. The keys are A, B, and C. And the values of those keys are apple, berry, and cherry, respectively. And what we're doing is we're printing out to the screen the keys A, B, and C. And right beside each key, we're going to have the value of them. So let's copy this into our Python editor. And we'll run it, and we will see the corresponding keys and values displayed in the console. When we go on to section 15, we have a list stored in a variable called choices, and we're going to be looping or iterating through those choices, but this time we're going to be using the keyword enumerate. What enumerate does for us is it allows us to print out the item. You can see we're printing out the item, but we're also printing out the index value of each item. So pizza will be 0, pasta will be 1, and so on. And the comma allows us to print it out on the same line. So let's go ahead and copy this code into Python. And we did a funny thing here with the index. We added 1 to it, and I'll show you what that does. First, let's try to run this code without that 1. And you can see that we've listed our menu items, our choices, and we've put line numbers beside each one. That's what that index does. The comma puts a little space. And that seems a little bit unnatural. Most people are used to seeing lists enumerated from 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the number 1 to the index. So instead of 0, we'll see 1. Instead of 1, we'll see 2, and so on. So there it is. And in section 16, we have 2 lists that we can iterate through using our for loop. We can iterate through them both at the same time and iterate with them in pairs, 3 and 2, 9 and 4, 17 and 8, 15 and 10, and so on. So we can compare 2 lists. In this case, if we're comparing 2 numbers, we can determine which number is larger, the number in list A or the number in list B. Now, in order to do this with a for loop, we have to introduce a new keyword, zip. And what we're doing here is we're entering 2 parameters in the zip function, list A and list B, and now we're ready to iterate through those 2 lists and compare them pair by pair to see which number is greater. So if the number in list A is greater, we print that number. Otherwise, we will print the number from list B. Now you'll notice here the lists are 2 different sizes. The zip function doesn't go all the way to the end of the larger list. It actually stops at the end of the smaller list. So we will compare 1, 2, 3, 5 pairs of numbers, and we will not compare more than that. So let's go ahead and see what this code does for us. We'll paste it into our code editor. And let's go ahead and run it. And you can see here it took 3 from list A because it's the larger number, 9 from list A, 17 from A, 15 from A, and so on, except for the last pair here. Instead of 19, it took 30 from list B, because that's the bigger number, and then it stopped. So zip doesn't go on comparing items that when it runs out of items, it just goes to the end of the shorter list. And then in 17, we have another list of fruit, and this is kind of interesting here. We're printing out a statement. You have the following fruit, okay, and we're going to iterate using our for loop. You have a banana, you have an apple, you have an orange. Let me close up this if statement here so you can see clearly what it's doing. We're just going to print them out, the various fruit. However, if we encounter a tomato in that list, and indeed there is a tomato, then we're going to stop cold. We're going to have a break statement. And recall, what does the break do? It breaks us out of any loop, whether it's a while loop or a for loop. It kicks us out completely. Now, if we never need to use that if, and we manage to print out everything in that list, then we can proceed on to the else and print a fine selection of fruit. But if we have to break out, we'll get a different message. A tomato is not a fruit. Recall that the else part, this part here, will not be executed if you break out prematurely. So in other words, you have to finish your for loop without a break in order for that to be printed. So let's copy all of this into our code editor to see how that works. And let's go ahead and run it. And notice we do have a tomato in that list, so we do expect a break to occur. And somewhere in there is a typo, and it looks like that typo is just a missing quotation mark. So let's go ahead and run it again, and we can see we went down through the list, and it says you have a banana, an apple, an orange. Not very good grammar, but it still works. And then it breaks out when it hits tomato, and it gives us the following message: a tomato is not a fruit. In 18, what I think we need to do here is we need to make a modification so that this does not occur, so the break part does not occur. And all we did here is we removed tomato from the list. So this will execute all the way to the end of the list, right to grape, without any break. In number 19, we are asked to create our own for loop that does something similar. So what I did was I just simply copied what we had here. Now remember, a good coder does less coding. Okay, so let's go ahead and paste that in there. And all you have to do, let me put some lines here so I can separate it out from what we did. We modify the code that was given to us with something else we want to do. So what I did was I considered job skills instead of fruit. So I converted the fruit list into jobs, and then you have, that is still the same line. And then instead of iterating through fruits, we iterated through the list of job skills. So we can eliminate those two lines. And then when we did our test, if f equals tomato, in this case, we're not considering tomato, we're considering watching television. And what you expect would occur if that is encountered in that list, watching television, we get the following message: watching television is not a job skill. and we break out of the for loop. If we don't encounter that at all, then at the very end, what's going to happen is we're going to get a message, a fine selection of job skills, instead of a fine selection of fruit. And I think it is important here to not only be able to to work with a loop, but also to modify code.